Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Whisper. Tonight we're leaving the safety of the cities behind and heading north, to the land where night lasts for months, where the wind speaks through the pines and where forgotten churches still stand against the snow. Waiting, Alaska is a place of silence, vast, empty, endless. But hidden in that silence are stories the locals don't tell. Chapels that glow when no one's inside. Crosses that turn the wrong way. Candles that never die no matter how cold it gets. These aren't ghost stories meant to entertain. They're the kind that leave you questioning what faith means when the light itself begins to twist. So tonight, I'll take you there. To 9 churches scattered across the frozen north, where prayers were whispered once and still echo through the ice. Stories of priests who vanished mid-sermon, of confessions that never ended, and of altars that feed on more than belief. If you thought the cold was what kept people away from Alaska's wilderness, you've never stepped inside one of its churches after dark. If you made it this far, you've stepped deeper into Alaska than most ever dare. But remember, every one of these stories began with faith and ended with something that answered back. From the candles that refused to die to the crosses that turned on their own. The people in these tales all believed they were safe inside God's house. They were wrong. So if you ever find yourself driving down a frozen road and see an old chapel glowing faintly in the distance, don't stop, don't pray, and whatever you do, don't go inside. If these stories chilled you to the bone, make sure to subscribe to Shadow Whisper. Leave a like to keep the stories alive, and tell me in the comments, which Alaskan church would you never step into even in daylight? I've always chased storms. There's something about the way the world turns wild that makes you feel like you're standing at the edge of truth, like the weather knows something you don't. That's what took me to Kodiak Island that winter, a story. For weeks, my podcast listeners had sent me messages about the priest who never left. A haunting tied to a small church that still clings to the cliffs on the island's south side. They said his name was Father Ansel, a missionary who disappeared in 1973 while searching for fishermen lost at sea. He was never found, but his church still stood, crooked, damp, and waiting. Most people on Kodiak avoid that place. The locals don't call it a church anymore. They call it the Watcher's House. I remember the day I arrived. Gray sky, wind sharp as knives, sea roaring against black rock. I'd taken the ferry alone, clutching my recorder and my curiosity like talismans. The church wasn't hard to find. Even from the dock, you could see its steeple leaning toward the ocean, as if gravity itself wanted to drag it under. The path leading up was half washed away by years of storms. Mud, moss, and bone-colored stones made every step feel uncertain. The closer I got, the quieter the world became. No wind, no gulls, just the sea's dull thud below the cliffs. When I reached the door, the smell hit me. Salt, damp wood, and candle wax. The door was swollen with moisture, but it gave way after a hard shove. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, each breath carrying the faint taste of rust. The church was small, maybe 20 pews, a single aisle leading to a stone altar draped in wrought black cloth. Candles littered the floor, melted down to puddles of pale wax. The roof leaked, water trickling down the walls like tears. I set my recorder on a pew, pressed record, and whispered into the mic. Kodiak Island, St. Mary's Chapel. Locals say it's haunted by Father Ansel, who vanished during the winter storm of '73. I'm here alone. Wind speed 40 miles an hour outside. Time 11:47 p.m. The words echoed too clearly, like the church was speaking them back to me. I walked down the aisle slowly, boots creaking on the warped wood. Every time lightning flashed through the cracked windows, I caught glimpses of the ocean below. Waves slamming against the cliff face, white spray shooting upward like smoke. Something about that view unnerved me. The ocean looked almost alive, rising and falling in rhythm, like the breathing of something huge. I turned back toward the altar, and that's when I saw it. A shape, dark and still, kneeling in front of the altar. A man in robes soaked through and tattered, head bowed. At first I thought it was a statue, some remnant of old devotion, but then the shoulders moved, slow, trembling like he was sobbing silently into his hands. My stomach twisted. "Hello?" I said. My voice came out small, swallowed by the damp air. He didn't move. I took a step closer. The floor groaned under my weight. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room, and for a split second I saw his face. Or rather, I saw the absence of one. Smooth, white, like glass wiped clean. No eyes, no mouth. Just the faint outline of where features should have been. My scream never made it past my throat. I stumbled backward, hit a pew, and went down hard. My flashlight rolled across the floor, beam spinning. When it stopped, it pointed directly at the altar. The priest was gone, but the puddles of melted wax had begun to ripple, soft concentric circles, like something moving underneath. I snatched my recorder from the pew, hands shaking. "If anyone's hearing this," I whispered, "there's someone here with me." I saw the thunder drown the rest. The entire church seemed to shudder with the force of it. Then, through the static of the storm, I heard a new sound. Faint, deliberate footsteps moving behind me, slow, barefoot. I turned, flashlight trembling, sweeping across the pews. Nothing. Just the flicker of shadows, the wet gleam of wood. Then from the far corner of the church, a voice whispered, not through the air, but through my recorder, "Your turn." The words bled into static. I dropped the mic, heart racing, and ran for the door. But when I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't move. My reflection in the wet wood shimmered strangely. I realized the moisture wasn't just rain. It was seawater, rising slowly from the cracks in the floor, flooding the church an inch at a time. The waves below the cliffs were pushing upward, sloshing through the foundation like the church was breathing with the tide. And in that murky reflection, I saw him again, standing behind me. This time he wasn't kneeling. He was standing tall, his faceless head tilted slightly, robes dripping black water onto the floor. I turned to face him, but the world went white. A flash of lightning, a roar of thunder, then nothing. When I woke, I was outside, snow falling soft across my face. The church loomed behind me, windows dark, roof sagging. My recorder lay beside me in the snow, still running. I played it back, expecting wind, static, anything to ground me in reality. Instead, I heard my own voice whisper, calm, hollow, and wrong. "Your turn," the same phrase. But it wasn't playback. It was new. I could hear the snow crunching under my own body in the background, and just before the tape cut, another sound joined it. The faint, wet shuffle of bare feet moving closer. When I finally made it back to the small motel near the docks, my fingers were so numb I could barely turn the key. The storm hadn't stopped, it had only changed shape. The wind outside sounded like the sea clawing at the land, waves hammering the cliffs with rage. I shut the door, locked it twice, and sat on the floor with my recorder still running. Its red light blinked weakly, a heartbeat in the dark. I should have smashed it right there, thrown it into the snow, walked away. But I needed to know what it had caught. I needed proof that what I'd seen wasn't some hallucination born from exhaustion and fear. So I pressed play. The first minute was just wind, howling, rattling glass, the ocean's roar beneath it. Then the sound dipped, muffled by distance. I could hear my own voice describing the church, my footsteps pacing. Then came that low whisper, the one that had followed me out into the storm. "Your turn." The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't even close. It was deep, wet, distorted, like someone speaking underwater. But what froze me wasn't the sound itself, it was what followed. Breathing. Slow, measured breathing. I paused the recording, heart pounding, then pressed play again. The breathing continued for 37 seconds, rhythmic, deliberate. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. A faint echo of waves, but not the kind that crash against cliffs. This sounded like water sloshing against walls. The realization hit like a hammer. The sound wasn't from the ocean outside. It was from inside the church, from under the floor. I listened again and again, rewinding until the tape began to whine. Each time I swore I heard new sounds beneath the breathing, soft knocks like someone tapping from beneath wooden boards. 3 times. Perfectly spaced. That's when the lights flickered. For a moment, the entire room dimmed and I saw something reflected in the window, something that made my heart stop. A figure standing in the dark behind me, tall, draped in robes that shimmered with wetness. I spun around. Nothing, just the hum of the heater. I turned back to the window, and my reflection was alone again. But on the glass where my breath had fogged it over, faint letters had appeared, drawn by something unseen. Come back. My knees almost gave out. The words lingered, then slowly faded as the condensation cooled. I didn't sleep. I sat there until dawn, the wind still screaming outside, the recorder silent on the table. When morning came, I told myself I'd leave the island. Forget the church. Forget the priest. Forget the voice, but when I stepped outside, I saw something that changed everything. Across the harbor, rising from the mist, the steeple of the church stood straight again. Whole. Unbroken. The cross gleamed faintly in the gray light. I stared at it for a long time. It had collapsed the night before. I'd seen it sagging, half-rotted, beaten by years of storms. But now it looked new, clean, as if the night had rebuilt it, and from somewhere across the water came the sound of a bell ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. I don't remember deciding to go back. I just found myself walking, the path muddy beneath my boots, the storm rebuilding itself around me. By the time I reached the cliffs, the sky had darkened again, and the wind carried salt and rot. The church waited at the edge, tall and whole, doors wide open as if expecting me. Inside, it looked different. The pews were upright, the altar freshly draped, candles flickering with steady flame. No water pooled on the floor this time. No smell of decay, just warmth. It almost felt holy again. "Father Ansel?" I said softly, voice shaking. "Are you here?" The air shifted. The candles trembled. From the corner of the room came a low rustling, like robes brushing stone. Then I heard it, the same whisper, clearer now, coming from somewhere behind the altar. "Your turn." My legs refused to move. A shadow lengthened across the floor, stretching toward me. From behind the altar, a figure rose. The same faceless priest, robes gleaming with seawater, head bowed slightly. I lifted my recorder with trembling hands. "Father Ansel," I managed, "what do you want?" The figure didn't answer. It just turned slowly, water dripping from its sleeves onto the floor. The sound of it was rhythmic, deliberate, each drop landing exactly 3 seconds apart. When it finally raised its head, I saw my reflection shimmer faintly across its smooth face. My own eyes staring back at me. Then without sound, its mouth began to move. An invisible mouth shaping words I couldn't hear. My recorder clicked alive, picking up static, then voice. It was me. My voice playing back something I hadn't said. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." The priest stepped closer. My knees buckled. I stumbled backward, the recorder slipping from my hand and clattering onto the floor. The sound that came through it next didn't belong in this world. A blend of whispers, sea spray, wind, and prayer twisted into one breath. Then he spoke again, his voice now layered with mine. "It's your turn." The candles went out. When light returned, lightning slicing across the windows, I was alone. The church was ruined again, ceiling broken, pews rotted. Water pooled at my feet. I picked up the recorder. It was still running. The time code showed nearly 3 hours had passed. I played it back later after I fled the island. But all it captured was the sound of waves and one faint heartbeat. My own. And under it, if you listened closely enough, another voice whispering in rhythm with the surf. "Stay. I uploaded the episode 2 weeks later. I don't even remember editing it. The days after leaving Kodiak are a blur of airports, hotel rooms, and sleepless nights. But somehow, when I woke up one morning, the file was already queued on my laptop, titled exactly as I would have named it, The Vanished Priest of Kodiak Island. The problem was, I hadn't touched my computer since the day I fled. At first, I thought exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Maybe I'd edited it before leaving, or maybe I'd forgotten. I almost deleted it until I pressed play. The opening was mine. My voice, calm, composed, the same tone I always used for my show. I was describing the church, the storm, the disappearance of Father Ansel. Everything was exactly as I remembered, until the 6-minute mark. That's when the recording changed. The audio began to distort, the pitch sinking low, the air behind my voice swelling with a sound like water. My words slowed, warped, and then stopped. For 10 long seconds there was only silence. Then a man's voice spoke, wet, heavy, patient. Your turn. I froze. It wasn't in the raw files. I'd checked them all after the storm. There was no trace of that phrase, not anymore. But here in the final version it was clearer, and then beneath it I heard something else, breathing. Slow, rhythmic, almost gentle. I stopped the playback. My hands were shaking. Every rational part of me wanted to erase the file and never think about it again. But my curiosity, that same stupid curiosity that had dragged me into that church, wouldn't let me. So I uploaded it. The episode went live on a Friday night. Within hours, my inbox filled with messages from listeners. They weren't talking about my narration. They were talking about the ending. One wrote, "Who's the second voice repeating your words?" Another said, "At 17:13, someone whispers my name." "How did you do that?" I checked the timestamps. 17:13. I played it. Nothing. Just static and the faint echo of waves. But when I put on headphones and listened again, really listened, I heard it. A soft murmur behind the static. A voice whispering my name. My blood turned to ice. I tore open the raw project folder one by one. Every original recording was clean. The final mix, though, the version that was live, was different. The waveform kept shifting each time I opened it. Tiny changes in the peaks and valleys, like the file itself was breathing. And in the background of the spectrogram, faint lines appeared, shapes that looked eerily like crosses. That night, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I ignored it. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, I answered. Static. Then a man's voice, faint but distinct. "Do you believe now?" I slammed the phone down, unplugged my laptop, and sat in silence. The air felt charged again, just like in that church. I could smell the same faint mix of salt and wax. I thought I'd escaped that place, but it had followed me home. Through sound, through the recording. I slept with the lights on. When I woke the next morning, the world felt wrong. My laptop was open. The podcast analytics were running, showing the usual map of listener locations. But there was a new one flashing in red. Kodiak Island. Active listener. I blinked, refreshing the page. The red dot stayed. Whoever it was, they were tuned in right now. I clicked on the location. It showed the exact coordinates of the church. The connection pinged again, live. Then a message popped into my email inbox. No subject line, no sender, just one line of text. Your turn. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding so hard I could barely think. But before I could reach the door, a faint sound began behind me. Something I hadn't heard since that night on the cliffs. The slow, measured scrape of footsteps across wet wood. I turned. There was no one there. Only my reflection in the window. Except this time it wasn't my reflection at all. The figure staring back wore black robes soaked and shining, his face unsmooth, featureless, and tilted slightly toward me. I whispered, "What do you want from me?" For a moment, the air thickened, pressing against my chest, and a whisper brushed the back of my neck, to be heard. Then, as quickly as it came, the pressure lifted. The room fell silent. I threw the laptop into a drawer, packed a bag, and left the apartment before sunrise. I stayed on the road for days, no plan, no sleep, no peace. But no matter how far I drove, I couldn't escape the sound. Every time I turned on the radio, even in dead zones, I'd hear it. That faint hiss, that whisper beneath the static, shaping words I didn't want to understand. 3 soft knocks, perfectly spaced, followed by the toll of a distant bell. And sometimes, if I listened too long, my own voice joining in, whispering through the noise, calm and certain, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." Then silence. I've always believed that every photograph captures more than just light. Sometimes it traps something unseen, a mood, a breath, a whisper that doesn't belong to the moment itself. That belief has never left me. It started in Alaska. It was the first week of February when I drove north to Eklutna, a small village carved out of snow and silence, half an hour from Anchorage. I'd come chasing beauty, not horror. My camera had taken me across the world, but there was something about Alaska's emptiness that called to me, a place where even silence has a pulse. Eklutna was famous for its spirit houses, tiny wooden shrines painted in bright reds and blues, built above graves to protect the souls beneath. I'd seen photos before, tourists smiling among the snow, colorful houses like toys scattered across a white field, peaceful, innocent. But standing there in person, it didn't feel that way at all. The air was too still, too aware. I could hear my own heart echo in the cold. The spirit houses leaned slightly, each one tilted toward the frozen ground as though listening. The colors, once bright, were fading, chipped and dull like dying embers. I knelt to photograph one, my gloved fingers brushing the paint, and for a moment I could swear the wood was warm. Beyond the graveyard stood St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Church, a white wooden structure with a small green dome and a single black cross that looked like it was sinking into the sky. It wasn't large and just 2 rooms and a bell tower, but it had a presence that filled the field like breath in cold air. I pushed the creaking door open. The hinges cried out and a wave of scent rolled toward me, pine resin, melted wax, and something metallic underneath. Candles lined the walls, some fresh, some melted down to puddles. Their faint light shimmered across rows of icons, saints painted on gold leaf, faces solemn, eyes almost too alive. My guide, a tall man in a long brown coat, stood by the doorway. His name was Yuri. That's all he said. His accent was thick, his voice slow. "You may take pictures," he told me, "but no flash. They do not like the flash." I laughed politely, assuming he was joking, but he didn't smile. His face was pale and expressionless, as though carved from the same wood as the pews. I lifted my camera and began shooting. The first few shots were simple, candles flickering, shadows bending across the old wood. But then I focused on one icon near the front of the church, a saint whose name had worn away from the plaque below. The painting was dark, older than the others, the colors muted. His eyes were unlike any I'd ever seen in religious art. They weren't painted upward toward heaven. They were looking straight ahead, straight at me. I zoomed in, trying to capture the detail of the brushstrokes, and that's when the air in the church changed. The warmth from the candles vanished, replaced by a deep chill that crawled across my skin. My breath fogged the lens. I blinked once and saw the saint's eyes close, slowly, like someone blinking. The camera slipped from my hands and struck the floor with a loud crack. The sound echoed through the church like thunder. Yuri didn't move. He just watched me, expression unreadable. I think that painting just moved," I said, my voice small. He tilted his head slightly. "Sometimes," he murmured, "they notice the ones who notice them." A shiver slid down my spine. I bent to pick up my camera, fingers trembling. The lens wasn't broken, but the display flickered for a moment before going black. I pressed the power button, nothing. When I looked up again, the candlelight had changed. Every flame leaned in the same direction, as if pulled by invisible breath. The saint's eyes were open again, wide this time, almost glowing in the dim light. I felt something behind me. A shift in air. The faint creak of the wooden floor. I turned sharply, but Yuri wasn't near the door anymore. He was standing behind the last pew, half hidden in shadow. "Are you okay?" I asked. He smiled, finally, but the expression was wrong. It didn't reach his eyes. "You took enough pictures," he said. "We should go now." I didn't argue. I just wanted to leave. Outside, the wind had stopped. The entire graveyard seemed to be listening. The colors of the spirit houses looked muted now, gray under the dim sky. I told Yuri thank you and walked back toward my rental car, the crunch of snow beneath my boots too loud in the silence. Before I opened the door, I glanced back at the church. Through the small window, I saw movement, a faint flicker like someone passing by. But Yuri was standing right next to me. I looked again. Nothing, just the faint glow of candles. I told myself I was imagining things. Travel fatigue, long exposure to cold, maybe dehydration. But when I got into the car and checked the camera screen, the device blinked to life on its own. It showed one last photo I didn't remember taking. Me, standing in front of the icon, and behind me, a faint, robed figure with one hand resting on my shoulder. The timestamp read 3 minutes after I'd left the church. I've always believed that every photograph captures more than just light. Sometimes it traps something unseen, a mood, a breath, a whisper that doesn't belong to the moment itself. That belief has never left me. It started in Alaska. It was the first week of February when I drove north to Eklutna, a small village carved out of snow and silence, half an hour from Anchorage. I'd come chasing beauty, not horror. My camera had taken me across the world. But there was something about Alaska's emptiness that called to me, a place where even silence has a pulse. Eklutna was famous for its spirit houses, tiny wooden shrines painted in bright reds and blues, built above graves to protect the souls beneath. I'd seen photos before, tourists smiling among the snow, colorful houses like toys scattered across a white field. Peaceful, innocent. But standing there in person, it didn't feel that way at all. The air was too still, too aware. I could hear my own heart echo in the cold. The spirit houses leaned slightly, each one tilted toward the frozen ground as though listening. The colors once bright were fading, chipped and dull like dying embers. I knelt to photograph one, my gloved fingers brushing the paint, and for a moment I could swear the wood was warm. Beyond the graveyard stood St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Church, a white wooden structure with a small green dome and a single black cross that looked like it was sinking into the sky. It wasn't large, just 2 rooms and a bell tower, but it had a presence that filled the field like breath in cold air. I pushed the creaking door open. The hinges cried out and a wave of scent rolled toward me. Pine resin, melted wax, and something metallic underneath.
Candles lined the walls, some fresh, some melted down to puddles.
Their faint light shimmered across rows of icons, saints painted on gold leaf, faces solemn, eyes almost too alive. My guide, a tall man in a long brown coat, stood by the doorway. His name was Yuri, that's all he said. His accent was thick, his voice slow. "You may take pictures," he told me, "but no flash. They do not like the flash." I laughed politely, assuming he was joking, but he didn't smile. His face was pale and expressionless, as though carved from the same wood as the pews. I lifted my camera and began shooting. The first few shots were simple, candles flickering, shadows bending across the old wood. But then I focused on one icon near the front of the church, a saint whose name had worn away from the plaque below. The painting was dark, older than the others, the colors muted. His eyes were unlike any I'd ever seen in religious art. They weren't painted upward toward heaven. They were looking straight ahead, straight at me. I zoomed in, trying to capture the detail of the brushstrokes, and that's when the air in the church changed. The warmth from the candles vanished, replaced by a deep chill that crawled across my skin. My breath fogged the lens. I blinked once, and saw the saint's eyes close. Slowly, like someone blinking. The camera slipped from my hands and struck the floor with a loud crack. The sound echoed through the church like thunder. Yuri didn't move. He just watched me, expression unreadable. I think that painting just moved, I said, my voice small. He tilted his head slightly.
Sometimes, he murmured, they notice the ones who notice them. A shiver slid down my spine.
I bent to pick up my camera, fingers trembling. The lens wasn't broken, but the display flickered for a moment before going black. I pressed the power button. Nothing. When I looked up again, the candlelight had changed. Every flame leaned in the same direction, as if pulled by invisible breath. The saint's eyes were open again, wide this time, almost glowing in the dim light. I felt something behind me. A shift in air. The faint creak of the wooden floor. I turned sharply, but Yuri wasn't near the door anymore. He was standing behind the last pew, half hidden in shadow. "Are you okay?" I asked. He smiled, finally, but the expression was wrong. It didn't reach his eyes. "You took enough pictures," he said. "We should go now." I didn't argue. I just wanted to leave. Outside, the wind had stopped. The entire graveyard seemed to be listening. The colors of the spirit houses looked muted now, gray under the dim sky. I told Yuri thank you and walked back toward my rental car, the crunch of snow beneath my boots too loud in the silence. Before I opened the door, I glanced back at the church. Through the small window I saw movement, a faint flicker like someone passing by. But Yuri was standing right next to me. I looked again. Nothing, just the faint glow of candles. I told myself I was imagining things. Travel fatigue, long exposure to cold, maybe dehydration. But when I got into the car and checked the camera screen, the device blinked to life on its own. It showed one last photo I didn't remember taking. Me, standing in front of the icon, and behind me, a faint, robed figure with one hand resting on my shoulder. The timestamp read 3 minutes after I'd left the church. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. The motel room felt wrong, not haunted, not cold, alive. Every sound felt too close, like the air itself was listening. I sat in bed until dawn, clutching my camera, waiting for the first gray light to crawl through the blinds. When it did, I told myself I'd leave Alaska that morning. I'd drive until I reached somewhere warm, somewhere human. I left the key on the counter, muttered a thank you to the desk clerk, and hurried to my car. The snow had softened overnight and the world was quiet, almost gentle. But there was something strange about the air. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt expectant, like something was waiting for me to make a sound. As soon as I started the car, the radio came to life on its own. A burst of static followed by that same low foreign voice whispering through the speakers. The same voice I'd heard on the phone last night, chanting my name between broken Russian prayers. I twisted the dial. Nothing changed. I killed the engine and the voice stopped. The silence after that was worse. The road out of Eklutna stretched endlessly ahead, flanked by endless trees and frozen air. I drove faster than I should have. Every mile marker felt like a heartbeat counting down to something. In the rearview mirror, the road curved behind me, empty, quiet. I almost felt foolish for being scared. Almost. Then the reflection moved, just slightly, a blur of dark fabric behind the back seat. I froze. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again, breath stuck in my throat. For a second I thought it was a trick of the light, but then the blur leaned forward and closer. I didn't look back. I just pressed the accelerator until the car shook, heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the tires scraping ice. The highway bent toward Anchorage, sunlight bleeding weakly over the mountains. But when I finally pulled into the edge of the city, I looked again. The back seat was empty. No shadow. No movement. Just my own shaking reflection in the mirror. I forced a laugh, short, empty, and muttered to myself, "You're fine. You're fine." But even as I said it, I could still feel the weight of that unseen hand on my shoulder, cold and deliberate. I checked into another hotel near the airport. A chain place this time. Bright lights, front desk chatter, people. I needed noise, warmth, proof that I was still among the living. I told myself that once I was back home, this would all dissolve into memory. Just another story. That night I turned on the TV for comfort. Some local station played a slow news broadcast. Weather, school closings, nothing unusual. I was halfway through repacking my bag when I heard the anchor say something that made my blood run cold. The historic St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Church of Eklutna sustained heavy fire damage last night. Investigators say the blaze began shortly after midnight. No injuries have been reported, as the church has been closed to visitors since 2017. Closed. Since 2017 I froze. My throat went dry. The memory of the guide, Yuri, tall brown coat, lifeless smile that flashed in my mind. I grabbed my phone, searched the church's name, and there it was in black and white. St. Nicholas Church permanently closed to the public following restoration collapse. But I'd been there yesterday. I'd spoken to someone. I'd walked inside. The air in the room changed. The heater stuttered and died, leaving only the faint hum of electricity. I picked up my camera, hands shaking. It powered on immediately and the screen glowing blue. The same folder of images waited there untouched. My heart sank when I saw the last photo again. Except this time, there was something new. A reflection in the glass of the icon. The same faint hotel lamp that now stood behind me. He was here. I turned, slow and deliberate. The room looked empty, except for the mirror by the bathroom door. In it, a tall robed figure stood behind me, faint but solid, his hand hovering an inch above my shoulder. I spun around. No one there. The mirror fogged over slowly and words began to form in the condensation, as if traced by an unseen finger. The letters dragged painfully, unevenly, but I could read them clearly. You brought me. The lights flickered once, twice. The camera in my hand clicked by itself, capturing photo after photo, rapid fire, endless. When I looked down at the screen, I saw myself in real time. The same hotel room, the same terror. And behind me, he grew clearer with every frame. I dropped the camera, stumbled toward the door, and ripped it open. The hallway was empty, long, white, and humming with fluorescent light. I ran, barefoot, breath tearing through my throat. The elevator lights flickered as I reached them, and somewhere in the distance I heard it again. That faint metallic ringing of a church bell. When I finally made it outside, the cold hit like a slap. Snowflakes drifted down gently, coating the parking lot in soft silver. My car sat there, engine off, windows clear. Inside, the passenger seat glowed faintly, the blue light of my camera still recording, still watching. I didn't go back for it. I drove straight to the airport, boarded the first flight out, and didn't look back until we were high above the clouds. Only then did I breathe, a shallow, shaky breath that didn't reach my chest. But as the plane rose higher, I felt a cold draft at my shoulder. The same weight, the same presence. I turned toward the window. My reflection stared back, and over my own faint image another face watched through the glass. The saint had followed me home. Denali is a place that doesn't forgive mistakes. You learn that fast when you hike her shadowed trails. One wrong step, one wrong turn, and the mountain swallows you whole. No sound, no sign, no trace. I came to the region that summer chasing something beautiful, not haunted. My crew and I were filming Echoes of the North, a documentary on forgotten structures hidden deep in Alaska's wilderness. Cabins, ranger outposts, mining shacks left to rot under snow in time. But that day the mountain had other plans. The morning started clear, a soft gold light spilling across ridges, trees whispering in wind. We set out before sunrise, cameras packed, batteries charged. My 2 crew members, Mark and Kayla, walked ahead, their voices muffled under layers of gear. I remember thinking how small we looked beneath those towering pines, like trespassers in a world that didn't belong to us. By afternoon, fog began to roll in, slow and deliberate. It didn't drift like normal mist. It climbed, curling upward from the valley, swallowing trees, erasing the trail behind us. Kayla checked the map on her GPS and frowned. "Signal's gone," she muttered. I tried mine too, dead. No service, no coordinates, no indication we were anywhere at all. Mark shrugged. "Let's head back before it gets dark." But we didn't get that chance. Because that's when we saw it. At first I thought it was a trick of light, a shape emerging in the fog, faintly glowing. A roofline, a steeple. Then as we got closer, it became clear. A small white chapel standing perfectly between the trees. Its paint looked fresh, the wood polished, no one said a word. We just stared. "There's nothing here on the map," Kayla whispered. "Nothing." The structure didn't fit the wilderness, and it was too clean, too deliberate. The fog drifted around it, never touching the walls. Its windows burned with the soft orange of candlelight. I should have turned back. But curiosity is a poison I never learned to resist. We approached the door. The wood was smooth, cold, no signs of age or decay. I pushed gently. It opened without sound. Inside, the air was thick and fragrant. Not with incense, but with something sweeter. Like perfume long evaporated and somehow returned. Dust hung in the air, catching candlelight in lazy spirals. The pews looked new, but when I brushed one with my sleeve, it crumbled slightly as if made of ash. Kayla whispered, "How is it? New and ancient?" No one answered. Mark raised his camera and began filming. The footage light flickered strangely, the lens fighting the air's density. Every candle in the room seemed to breathe, shrinking, swelling, responding. Then I saw it. The altar at the far end. A single book lay there, open. Its pages glowed faintly, like parchment lit from within. I walked toward it, drawn by something I couldn't name. Each step made the floor sag under my boots, soft, rotten, and wet. By the time I reached the altar, I could smell the rot beneath the wood, something stagnant and alive. The book was thick, leather-bound, embossed with a cross. Dust coated its spine, but not the pages. They were clean, fresh. I shouldn't have touched it. But I did. The first page was blank. The second, too. Then on the third, I saw it. Written in dark ink, crisp and unmistakable, my full name not scribbled. Not old. Written in a hand I recognized my own. I froze. My mouth went dry. "Kayla, Mark." When I looked back, the room was empty. The pews, the walls, the doorway we'd come through, gone. The air turned heavy, pressing against my chest. Every candle flickered wildly, then snuffed out one by one. The darkness came alive with sound. Faint whispers, voices overlapping, whispering my name in a dozen different tones. The floor creaked behind me. Someone exhaled close to my ear. I spun around. Nothing. Only the faint shimmer of dust in the dying candlelight. Then I felt it. A hand brushing my shoulder. Cold. Dry. I stumbled backward. Slammed the book shut. Every candle in the church went dark at once. The silence that followed was so thick it rang in my ears. Then the sound returned. Not whispering this time, but humming. Soft. Slow. Like the building itself was breathing. I groped through the dark, heart hammering. My hands met the wall where the door had been, but now it was solid. No seam, no handle. Just smooth, cold wood. Panic set in. I pounded against it, shouting for Mark, for Kayla, for anyone. My voice died before it left my throat. The church swallowed it. Then I heard footsteps. Light ones. barefoot, moving slowly up the aisle behind me. I turned, raising my flashlight. The beam caught the altar, and standing behind it was a figure. A man in priest's robes, face hidden beneath a white hood. His hands rested on the closed book. He didn't move, didn't breathe, but when I stepped closer, his head tilted slightly, not toward me but upward, toward the ceiling. I followed his gaze. Every candle flame, now extinguished, had left behind a mark of soot, a blackened circle on the ceiling, perfectly aligned, forming a pattern, a cross. And in its center, something wet began to drip, slow, steady drops of red falling onto the altar, staining the book. The priest raised his head at last. His face was gone. At first I didn't move. I couldn't. The thing behind the altar, the faceless priest, just stood there in silence, head tilted slightly upward, as though listening to something I couldn't hear. The red droplets kept falling from the ceiling onto the book, slow and steady, soaking into the pages where my name was written. The smell in the air changed. Copper, damp earth, rot. I stumbled backward, flashlight trembling in my hand. Its beam flickered, catching the priest's robes, which shimmered like wet fabric though the air was dry. "Who are you?" I managed. He didn't answer. Instead, he raised one hand, pale, long-fingered, and pointed toward the front pews. The sound that followed came from beneath the floor, a creak, then a low dragging scrape, like something heavy shifting in the dark. I shone my light down, and my stomach turned. The wood was rising. Beneath the floorboards, shadows swelled and moved, pressing against the gaps between planks as though something beneath was trying to surface. For a heartbeat, I saw fingers, pale, translucent, pushing upward through the cracks, grasping for air. I staggered backward, slamming into the wall. My voice broke through the panic. "Mark, Kayla!" Only my echo answered, then another sound. Faint, rhythmic, footsteps. I turned the light toward the aisle. Two silhouettes stood there, human shapes, vague in the dark, their outlines flickering like reflections on water. They didn't walk so much as drift closer, step by step. "Kayla?" I whispered. The nearer one tilted its head slightly. I saw her parka, her camera still strapped to her chest. But her face was pale and blank, skin smooth and empty. No eyes, no mouth, just the faint hint of where they should have been. I backed up, flashlight trembling. "What happened to you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, both shapes stopped mid-aisle, their bodies swaying gently like reeds in wind. The priest behind the altar moved for the first time, lowering his arm. Instantly, every candle in the church flared back to life. The sudden light blinded me. When I blinked the afterimage away, the two figures were gone, and the priest was now standing directly in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint imprint of veins under his translucent skin. He leaned forward, and though he had no mouth, I heard a whisper, not aloud but inside my head. "You read your name." My throat tightened. "What?" "You signed the book." "I didn't." "Now it remembers you." The candles flickered violently. The shadows stretched long, twisting around us like smoke. I stumbled sideways, groping for the wall, desperate for a way out. But the surface beneath my hands was changing. The smooth wooden paneling rippled beneath my fingers, turning soft, pulsing, almost alive. I pulled my hand back. The wall was breathing. The priest turned his faceless head toward the altar again. The book was open now, pages fluttering though there was no wind. The ink from my name bled outward, branching like veins through the parchment. The whisper returned. "Every traveler leaves something behind. You left your name. It belongs here now." The lights dimmed again. One by one, the candles snuffed themselves out, until only a single one burned on the altar. I ran. I didn't think, I just ran straight down the aisle. Boots slamming against warped boards, heart pounding so loud it drowned every other sound. I hit the far wall, searching for where the door should have been, but my hands found nothing but smooth wood. I turned in circles, flashlight beams slicing through black air. The church wasn't dark, it was empty. The pews, the altar, even the ceiling markings are all gone. Just an endless corridor of gray wood stretching in every direction. The church had changed shape. The air grew cold enough to sting. Frost crept up the walls, spreading fast, sealing every surface in white. My breath hung in front of me in short, panicked bursts, and then I saw it. A faint orange glow far down the hall. A door. I sprinted toward it, my boots slipping on the ice. My lungs burned, every inhale cutting like glass. When I reached the door, I grabbed the handle. It turned easily. Outside, the storm had broken. The fog was gone. The sky above Denali was clear, filled with stars. I stumbled out, gasping, falling to my knees in the snow. The night was still, silent. The trees stood unmoving around me, their branches heavy with frost. When I turned back, there was no church, only empty forest. My flashlight beam swept across tree trunks, snowdrifts, shadows, nothing, no building, no footprints except my own. I laughed then, a hollow, shaking sound that barely resembled laughter. I imagined it, I whispered. I imagined all of it. That's when I heard the bell, soft, distant, 3 times. I looked around wildly, but there was no direction to the sound. It came from everywhere, the trees, the ground, the air. Then faintly, from somewhere behind me, came Kayla's voice. Wait. I turned, light trembling in my hand. The forest was empty except for one thing. A door, just standing there, freestanding in the snow, perfectly upright. Its paint was white. The handle brass. The exact door of the church. The moment my light touched it, something moved behind the wood. A shadow, faint and fluid, pacing slowly. Then a whisper. You shut it too soon. The handle began to turn. The door stood alone in the snow, framed by nothing but air. No walls, no roof, just that one impossible rectangle. Its white paint gleaming under starlight. A relic that shouldn't exist. Like a photograph cut out of another world and dropped here by mistake. I told myself not to touch it. Every part of me screamed to walk away. But the whisper on the wind, that soft, coaxing tone that sounded too much like my own voice, wouldn't stop. You shut it too soon. I gripped my camera, pointed the lens toward the door. The viewfinder showed nothing but static. The image rippled, warped, then cleared, and for half a second I saw the chapel standing there again. Candles lit, the faceless priest waiting at the altar. When I lowered the camera, the door was still there, alone. My breath hung in the air as I stepped closer. The brass handle gleamed faintly, untouched by frost. I raised a gloved hand, hesitated, and whispered, I don't belong to you. The door shuddered, just once, like it had heard me. Then the handle turned by itself, slow and deliberate, until the latch clicked open. The wind died. The forest stilled. Inside the doorway was not darkness. It was light, soft, golden, alive. The kind of glow that feels like warmth in a dream. The scent of perfume and dust filled the air again. I don't remember deciding to move, but my body did. One step forward, then another, until my boot crossed the threshold, and suddenly I was inside. The chapel was back. Whole again. The walls gleamed. The pews were clean. The candles burned steadily, their light dancing across the stone altar. The book was still there, the same one with my name written inside. The priest stood beside it, motionless, head bowed. I turned to leave, but the door behind me was gone again. Of course it was. Why? I whispered. What do you want from me? The priest didn't move, but the candles flickered once, as if stirred by an unseen breath. The air thickened, pressing against my chest, and from the walls came a faint rustling, the sound of turning pages. I looked around. The walls themselves were covered in faint carvings, lines, symbols, names. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every inch of wood and stone etched with the names of strangers. Some were faded, others fresh. I walked closer. My flashlight beam caught one name near the arch of a window. The letters scratched shallowly, almost pleading. Kayla Henderson. My heart seized. I turned, scanning every wall, and saw another near the altar etched lower to the floor. Mark Holloway. I stumbled back. No. Then I noticed something else. Beneath both names, faintly carved into the grain, was a date. Today's. The book on the altar flipped open on its own. The pages turned rapidly until it stopped, on a new one. My flashlight caught the ink as it began to spread, curling into fresh letters. Elliot Gray. My name. The priest's head lifted slowly. He didn't have eyes, but I could feel his gaze lock onto me. You came back, he whispered. His voice wasn't one voice anymore. It was layered, dozens of tones at once, overlapping in perfect unison. I shook my head. I didn't write that. You read it. I didn't. You read it, and now it reads you. The candles flared high, flames turning blue. The scent of perfume curdled into something foul, thick like rot. The floor trembled beneath me, groaning under invisible weight. The walls began to breathe again, slow, rhythmic, like lungs inhaling. I backed away toward the door that wasn't there, but now the wall in its place shimmered faintly, showing movement behind it. Dark figures pressing outward, hands flattening against the wood from the other side. The priest extended his arm toward me. The mountain needs its witnesses. The light in the room bent, folding around him, the air warping with it. I could feel something tugging at me. Not my body, but my name, as if it were being pulled apart syllable by syllable. I screamed, grabbed the camera from around my neck, and hurled it at the altar. It hit the book, snapping it shut. Instantly, the candles went out. The sound stopped. The air went still. I stood there in total darkness, gasping. Then, from somewhere near my feet, came a faint voice. A whisper that wasn't the priest's this time. Elliot? Kayla. I dropped to my knees, fumbling in the dark. Kayla, where are you? Her voice was faint, strained, distant. Under the floor. I felt along the planks until my hand brushed something wet. Melted wax, or maybe water. Then the wood beneath my palm pulsed. Once. Twice. A shape pressed upward from beneath. A hand. Human. Blue-gray, fingertips tapping weakly. I pulled back, horrified. The planks began to crack, small fissures spreading outward in circles. Then I saw her face. Kayla's. Staring up through the floor. Eyes wide and glassy, mouth moving soundlessly. The priest's voice returned. Softer now, almost kind. Every name written becomes a stone. Every witness becomes a wall. The cracks widened, glowing faintly with light, swallowing her image. The floor sealed itself. The air turned calm again, candles reigniting one by one. The priest lowered his hand, serene. It remembers, he said simply. When I blinked, I was outside again. The door was gone, the forest silent. My footprints the only ones in the snow. But when I checked the footage on my camera, the camera I'd thrown, it was undamaged, recording still. The screen showed the church standing tall and whole again, lights burning inside and through the doorway, the faint silhouette of a priest watching me leave. I shut the camera off and started walking toward the mountain. I didn't look back. But sometimes, when I check my map now, a small black cross appears near Denali's shadow. No road leads to it. No coordinates match, and the note beside it simply reads, "Your name is written." I always thought silence was safe, that in places untouched by people, silence meant peace. But in the frozen plains outside Nome, silence isn't empty. It listens. I had come to Alaska chasing the ghosts of faith. Abandoned missions, forgotten churches, chapels half buried in snow where prayers once echoed and then froze forever. My readers loved it. Faith Lost to the North, that was the title of my new blog series. I told myself it was about history, not superstition, but sometimes history hides in the places you're not supposed to find. Locals in Nome warned me about one mission, a church that didn't exist on any registry, no records, no name. They called it the Crossfield. Said it sat somewhere deep in the tundra, unreachable by car, built by missionaries in the early 1900s, forgotten after a storm took half the congregation. I should have taken that as a story, not a destination. But curiosity is my curse. So I rented a snowmobile, packed my gear, and followed the coordinates an old hunter scribbled for me in pencil on a napkin. "If you find it," he said, "don't touch the cross." The wind was brutal that morning, when sharp, relentless. The sky hung heavy with clouds and the world felt stripped of color. For hours there was nothing but white. Then, as the light began to fade, I saw it. A dark shape breaking the endless snow. The Crossfield. It stood alone in the middle of the plain, surrounded by drifts higher than its walls. Its steeple leaned at a crooked angle, and the wooden cross on top was half-snapped, hanging like a broken limb. I parked the snowmobile and approached slowly. The place was smaller than I expected. One door, one window, a roof buckled by time. The wind seemed to die as I stepped closer, like it was holding its breath. The door gave way with a groan. Inside, the air was still. My flashlight beam cut through dust and frost, landing on rows of pews warped by moisture. But what caught my attention first were the names. Every wall, every beam, every inch of wood was carved with names, hundreds of them. Men's, women's, children's. Some neat, others frantic. Some carved deep, others barely scratched. I walked down the aisle slowly, running my glove over the nearest one. The letters were crude. E.M. Thomas, 1923. When I brushed away the frost, my glove came away wet. At first I thought it was meltwater, but under the beam of my flashlight it glistened dark red. Blood old maybe, but still wet, still fresh enough to shine. I stared at my glove, heartbeat rising. Animal blood, I muttered to myself, forcing logic into my voice. Someone marked the walls, a prank. It's just a prank. Then I heard it, a whisper. Soft, low, coming from behind the pulpit. I froze. At first it sounded like wind moving through the cracks, just the building breathing. But then the words took shape, quiet but unmistakable. Our Father who art in heaven. The voice was mine, my exact tone, my exact rhythm, only it wasn't right. The words twisted backward, each syllable unraveling like thread pulled from a prayer. I staggered backward, knocking into a pew. The sound stopped. The silence that followed felt alive, thick as fog. I swung my flashlight toward the pulpit. Nothing. Only an old Bible, frozen open to a page that had turned black with mold. My recorder is still clipped to my jacket, picked up every breath. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking. "Show yourself." Something shifted behind me, the soft creak of wood under weight. I turned. There, standing halfway down the aisle, was a shape, human-sized. Still. "Hey," I shouted, forcing courage into the word. The light caught it, and my stomach twisted. It was a cross, a wooden crucifix 7 feet tall, leaning against the pews. Only the figure nailed to it wasn't carved, and it was real. Skin shriveled, gray, mouth open in a soundless scream. The eyes were gone, sockets black and deep. I stumbled back so fast I fell, my flashlight spinning. The beam landed on the far wall where the carvings of names had begun to change. Fresh letters appeared, scratching themselves into the wood, slow, deliberate, one line at a time. Homasit was spelling my last name. I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the door, heart hammering, lungs burning. The handle jammed. I threw my shoulder into it once, twice, and it burst open on the third try, and I fell out into the snow. The cold hit like a slap. I ran toward the snowmobile, tripping, gasping, too scared to look back. My gloves were slick, my breath tearing through my throat. When I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, The church stood silent behind me, just a dark shape against the endless white. Then I saw the footprints. Beside mine, barefoot, deep. They appeared one after another, forming as I watched like someone invisible was walking right behind me. I pushed the ignition. The snowmobile roared to life. I didn't stop until the church was gone, swallowed by distance and fog. But the whispers didn't stop, they followed me. Through the roar of the engine, through the wind, through the pulse in my ears, the Lord's Prayer, still backward, still in my own voice. By the time I reached my motel back in Nome, my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the door. I felt like I'd been running for hours, but the clock said only 45 minutes had passed. The snowmobile was still ticking, outside engine cooling, steam rising off it in thin curls. Inside, the room was warm and dim, but the warmth didn't reach me. My body still felt cold from the inside out, like the snow had seeped beneath my skin. I peeled off my gloves. The stain from the church was still there. Dark red, dried now, but unmistakable. I told myself it had to be animal blood, rust, something logical, but a part of me already knew. I set the recorder on the table, thumb hovering over the play button. I hesitated. My stomach churned. Then I pressed it. The first 30 seconds were what I expected, my own voice describing the church, the carvings, the walls. Then came the part where I brushed the frost away. I heard my sharp intake of breath when my glove came away wet. Then, silence. For a long moment, nothing but a low hum, like wind pressing against the mic. Then a voice whispered, "Not mine." Not really. It sounded like me, but older, slower. "Our Father who art in heaven." The words tumbled backward, each syllable twisting into nonsense, but the tone was unmistakable. It was my voice, reversed, speaking a prayer I never said. I stopped the recording, heart pounding. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls had inched closer while I listened. I pressed play again, and this time I let it run. At the 30-second mark, a second voice joined mine. Low, raspy, impossible to place. It didn't speak words, and it hissed. The hiss became a whisper, the whisper became a breath. Then, at the 50-second mark, the knock. 3 soft thuds, perfectly spaced. My head snapped toward the door. Nothing. But the sound came again, not from the hallway but from beneath the floor. I stared at the worn carpet, my pulse loud in my ears. Another 3 knocks. Louder, the recorder played on. I pressed pause and the room fell silent. I waited, barely breathing. No sound. Then, from behind me, a whisper. "You touched the cross." I spun around, no one there. Only the mirror above the sink. My own reflection, pale and wild-eyed. But as I stared, the reflection opened its mouth. "You're still inside," it said. I stumbled backward, knocking the chair over. My heart raced so fast I thought I'd pass out. I blinked hard, and the reflection was normal again. Just me, shaking. I grabbed my coat, shoved everything into my bag. My plan was simple. Leave Nome before nightfall, get on the next plane, go home. But when I reached the door, my phone buzzed. A new email notification, no sender, no subject, just one line of text. Look down. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I lowered my eyes. Across the carpet of the motel room, fresh prints had appeared. Barefoot. Small, pressed into the fabric as if someone had walked there seconds before. I backed away until my knees hit the bed. The prints led from the window straight to where I was standing, and stopped at my feet. The recorder started on its own. Static. Then my voice again, reversed, low and wrong. I lunged for it, but before I could hit stop, the voice changed. It wasn't reversed anymore, it was clear. "You're still in the snow," it said. The lamp flickered. I grabbed my bag and ran. The hallway was empty, the carpet soft under my boots. But as I reached the stairwell, I felt it, the cold again, rolling up from the floorboards, curling around my legs like fog. From somewhere above, faint but distinct, came the sound of a hymn, sung backward. I bolted down the stairs 2 at a time, burst out into the parking lot, and into the blinding white of late afternoon snow. My car sat where I left it. I jumped in, slammed the door, and started the engine. The radio came on by itself. Static, then my voice. "Forgive me, Father." I shut it off. The static didn't stop. For a second, the world outside blurred. Trees, snow, sky bending at the edges like warped film. My breath fogged the windshield. Then faintly on the glass in front of me, frost began to form. Letters. Beneath the cross. I wiped it away with my glove. It came back instantly. I hit the gas. The tires spun, then caught, and the car lurched forward onto the road. The frost letters trailed off the glass as I sped away, but even as the town receded in the rearview mirror, the whispers didn't stop. They were in the vents, in the tires, in my head. Prayers, reversed and broken, spoken in my own voice. And sometimes between the lines of static, another voice. "Though patient, your name is written." I told myself I wouldn't go back. That whatever I'd seen, whatever had whispered through my voice and carved its message into the frost, was behind me. But fear is a strange thing. It doesn't stay still. It follows. For 3 nights after leaving Nome, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that church. The cracked pulpit, the blood on my glove, the sound of my voice praying backward. I'd wake drenched in sweat, gasping, the echo of those words still moving through my head like a song I couldn't forget. On the 4th night, I found something in my camera. I hadn't noticed it before, in the single photo I didn't remember taking. The inside of the church, the pulpit at the center. But there was something behind it. A dark shape standing just beyond the frame. And on the wooden beam above the altar, carved deeper than all the other names, I could see one new addition. My name, fresh, precise. That was the moment I knew I had to go back. Not out of courage, not even out of curiosity, but because I couldn't stand not knowing what the church had done with my name. The next morning, I rented another snowmobile. The same hunter who'd warned me the first time saw me loading my gear and shook his head. "Some crosses," he said. "You don't carry twice." I didn't answer. The drive out was different this time. The world was quieter. The wind didn't scream, it whispered. Not words, but rhythm. Slow and steady. 3 beats and a pause. Like knocking buried under the sound of the engine. When the fog parted, the plain opened before me. The church was there. Not ruined. Not half buried. Whole. Standing proud against the snow like it had never aged. I killed the engine and stepped off the snowmobile. The wind stopped completely. My boots sank deep into the powder, leaving crisp prints. But even as I walked, I could see another trail forming beside mine, barefoot. I reached the door. It opened before I touched it. Inside, the air was warm. Too warm. Candles flickered on every pew, their flames steady despite the lack of breeze. The names on the walls looked different now. Carved deeper, the grooves darker, like the wood itself had begun to bleed. And there it was again. The cross at the front, towering above the altar. But the figure nailed to it was gone. Only the stains remained, brown streaks running down the wood like tears. The Bible on the pulpit was open this time. Pages trembling slightly, though nothing moved the air. I stepped closer. The text wasn't English. It wasn't even letters. The lines curved and looped like veins, spreading outward across the page. I blinked and realized it wasn't ink at all. It was carved into the paper itself, each stroke deep and red. My camera whirred softly on its own, lens adjusting. Through the viewfinder, the writing looked different. Words appeared clear and familiar. "Welcome back, Thomas." I lowered the camera. The page was blank again. That's when the cross groaned. A slow wooden cry, deep and old, like a ship's hull breaking under weight. The floor trembled beneath my boots. From behind the altar came the faintest whisper. The same one I'd heard the first time. My voice. This time, it wasn't reversed. "Do you understand now?" it asked. I turned. Standing behind the cross was a figure, not faceless but familiar. Me, the same jacket. The same boots. The same cut on my hand from the first visit. He smiled, a soft, knowing curve of my own lips. "Who are you?" I demanded. He tilted his head. "You left your name here." The church shuddered again. Candles tilted, their wax dripping like tears. "You carved it in blood." The other me whispered. "You just didn't see yourself do it." I backed away, stumbling. No, I didn't." "You prayed in reverse," he said, stepping closer. "That's how you opened the door." I felt something behind me. Heat, movement. The cross. It was bleeding again. Streams of red running down the wood, pooling at the base of the altar. "Every traveler who speaks backward opens the door," the other me continued. His voice was calm, reverent. "And when they leave, another takes their place." He stopped inches from me. I could feel the warmth radiating off him. Or maybe it wasn't warmth at all. Maybe it was something deeper. I turned to run, but the door was gone. In its place, a wall of names. Thousands. Burning faintly red. Somewhere within them, mine glowed brightest. The other me stepped behind the pulpit, hands clasped like a priest about to deliver a sermon. "You've been written, Thomas," he said softly. "You belong beneath the cross now." The light in the room dimmed. The candles shrank to pinpoints, the air thick with the smell of burning wood. My ears filled with whispers. Hundreds of voices layered on top of one another, speaking my name. I dropped to my knees. My camera fell from my hands, the screen blinking, recording everything. The last thing I remember before the darkness swallowed me was his voice. Mine, speaking the Lord's Prayer. Slowly, clearly, but still backward. When I woke, I was lying in the snow outside. The church was gone. The plain stretched empty in every direction, but when I reached for my recorder, it was still running. Static at first. Then a faint whisper, my own voice. "For thine is the kingdom." It cut off. Then silence. I looked down. The snow beneath my knees was marked with a single symbol, a cross, and beside it, a set of footprints. Barefoot. Deep. Leading back toward where the church had been. The first thing you notice about Kodiak is the silence. It doesn't sound like normal quiet, not peaceful, not empty. It's a silence that listens back. We arrived in February when the ghost town sleeps beneath layers of ice. The old copper mills, their red timber walls rotting against the mountain slope, looked like a frozen memory, half buried, half watching. My partner Elise and I were documentary filmmakers chasing vanishing America, forgotten places, lost voices, but Kodiak wasn't forgotten. It just didn't want to be found. The road ended long before the town began. We hiked the last few miles on foot, our boots cracking ice that had reclaimed everything. By late afternoon, mist crawled through the valley, swallowing the trail behind us. The chill felt different here, not just cold but aware. We set up camp inside what used to be a supply office, windows blown out, papers frozen into the floor. From there you could see the entire slope, collapsing bridges, rusted cables, and at the very top, something odd, a small wooden chapel barely standing, roof half gone, steeple snapped clean. "That'll make a perfect closing shot," Elise said, breath fogging in the air. I remember how she smiled, exhausted, cheeks red from the wind, before she pointed her camera toward the chapel and hit record. That's when the static started. Her monitor screen flickered, glitched, then froze on a single frame. A faint blue glow pulsing beneath the chapel's snow-covered floorboards. "Battery issue?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, it's reading heat." But there was no heat in Kennecott. Only ice and the wind whispering through broken rafters. We followed the light up the slope. Every step crunched loud enough to echo off the canyon walls. The chapel was smaller than it looked. A one-room structure leaning against its own shadow. Its door hung open, frozen in place by a sheet of ice that glittered like glass. Inside, snow had drifted over everything. Pews, hymnals, the remains of an altar. A faint draft moved through the cracks, making the boards moan. The blue glow came from the far end of the room where the snow looked thinner, almost translucent. Elise knelt down, brushing the surface gently with her gloved hand. "There's something under here," she whispered. I crouched beside her. The ice was clear enough to see shapes, outlines, maybe rocks. But as my eyes adjusted, the shapes became faces. Dozens of them. Men, women, children. Their skin pale blue, their eyes wide open, trapped mid-breath. I stumbled back, my knees hitting the wood. "Jesus Christ, they're singing," Elise said suddenly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were glassy, entranced. I didn't hear anything, just the wind groaning through the gaps in the walls. But she tilted her head as if listening to a choir. "Elise," I said, grabbing her arm. "We're leaving." She blinked like waking from a trance, nodded once, and followed me out into the white glare. The entire hike back, she said nothing. Neither did I. But the silence between us wasn't empty. It carried something with it, a rhythm. 3 steps, pause. 3 steps, pause. Like a heartbeat trying to mimic song. That night in the cabin, I reviewed the drone footage. The blue glow was there, steady as a pulse. Then, halfway through the clip, the ice shifted, faint cracks spidering across the surface. And in that still frame, every frozen mouth seemed to move at once. I turned the volume up, nothing. Just static. But when I slowed the footage to half speed, a low hum emerged, soft and layered like breathing through glass. Behind me, Elise stirred from her sleeping bag. "You hear it now, don't you?" she whispered. I looked over my shoulder. Her eyes were open, fixed on the window. Frost had begun to bloom across the glass, spreading outward from 3 small points. Knocks, 1, 2, 3. Perfectly spaced. The sound came again, sharper this time. Something scraped against the wood outside. I went to the door, flashlight trembling in my hand, and opened it just enough to see. There was no one, only the faint outline of footprints in the snow, not fresh, not deep, just there. They led away from the cabin and up the hill toward the chapel. "Elise," I said, "get your stuff. We're leaving right now." But she didn't answer. I turned around and she was standing at the window, her breath fogging the glass from inside. Her hand was lifted, palm pressed flat against it, mirroring the prints that now appeared on the outside. The frost thickened between them, sealing her reflection in 2. That's when I finally heard it, faint but real, coming from somewhere inside the wind. A choir, dozens of voices, overlapping, humming the same broken tune I'd heard in the slowed footage. Only now it was clearer, closer. It came from under the floor. I looked down. The boards beneath my boots shimmered faintly blue, the same color as the light from the chapel, and the sound grew louder. The sound came first as vibration, deep and slow, crawling up through the wooden planks like the heartbeat of something buried alive. I stood frozen in the middle of the cabin, afraid to move, afraid to even breathe. The floor beneath me pulsed faintly blue, just like the light that had flickered under the chapel ice. "Elise," I whispered. She didn't answer. Her hand was still pressed to the frosted window, her breath fogging the glass in slow rhythmic bursts. The blue glow reflected faintly in her pupils, and for a moment I thought she was humming. A low, trembling sound perfectly matched to whatever was beneath us. I reached out, took her shoulder. "We have to go." Her head turned toward me, too slowly, too smooth. The smile that spread across her face didn't belong to her. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "They're almost free." Before I could react, a sharp crack echoed through the cabin. One of the floorboards split right between us, a hairline fissure glowing from underneath. A burst of cold air poured out, and so cold it burned my skin, and along with it came that sound again, clearer now. It wasn't music. It was breathing. Dozens of lungs inhaling and exhaling in perfect, suffocating harmony. I stumbled back, grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the floor. The cracks widened, and through them I saw eyes, human eyes, staring up through the gaps. Blue, glassy, unblinking. "Elise, get away!" I shouted. She didn't move. Her hand dropped limply to her side, and her head tilted slightly upward, as if listening to something above. Then she whispered, "They remember." I didn't wait. I lunged forward, grabbed her by the arm, and yanked her toward the door. She resisted for a second, and her body rigid, uncooperative, and then stumbled forward. I kicked the door open, and the night swallowed us. Outside, the cold hit like a wall of knives. Snow whipped sideways in the wind, erasing every direction. But the glow from the chapel at the top of the hill cut through the storm. A pale, pulsing light, stronger now, like a beacon calling her name. Elise saw it too. She gasped, not in fear but in awe, and before I could stop her, she ran. Elise. Her boots crunched on ice, her shadow darting between half-buried shacks, each step carrying her closer to that dying church. I followed, slipping, cursing, heart hammering so loud I could barely hear the wind anymore. The cold wasn't natural now. It stung with purpose, curling into my lungs like smoke. When I reached the chapel door, she was already inside. The faint light from my flashlight met her silhouette standing near the altar. The glow beneath the snow-covered floorboards was brighter than ever, flooding the room in blue. "Elise," I panted. "We have to go now." She turned toward me, her expression soft and distant, her eyes reflecting the glow. "Can't you hear them?" she whispered. They'd been waiting for someone to listen. The light swelled brighter and brighter until it drowned every shadow. I squinted, raised my arm to shield my face. Then the hum broke into something else. A long, low note like hundreds of voices gasping in unison. The floor cracked. With a groan that sounded like wood and bone breaking together, the ice split open. A cold mist poured out, swirling up to the ceiling, and shapes began to rise beneath it. They weren't solid. They weren't alive. But I could see their faces, the same ones from beneath the chapel, climbing out of the ice as though surfacing from a dream. Men, women, children, their mouths open in silent song, eyes wide and shimmering with grief. I stumbled back toward the doorway, my breath choking in my throat. Elise didn't move. She just stood there, arms limp, whispering to them like they were family. One of the figures reached for her. Its hand brushed her cheek, a light touch but enough to frost her skin white. She gasped, body shaking violently, but didn't scream. The sound built higher, vibrating through the walls, shaking dust from the rafters. The choir wasn't singing anymore. They were calling, "Elisa!" I shouted again, but the sound of my voice was nothing against theirs. Then she turned to me, and for a second I saw both of her eyes. One brown, the other now pale blue and glassy. "You shouldn't have filmed them," she said softly. "You gave them a voice." The floor beneath us splintered open. I lunged forward, grabbed her arm, and pulled with everything I had. She screamed then, a sound that cut through the choir like lightning, and for one brief instant, all the glowing faces turned upward. I dragged her through the doorway, just as the entire front section of the chapel collapsed inward. Snow and ice exploded outward like shattered glass, filling the air with a freezing fog. We tumbled down the slope, rolling until the world blurred white and dark together. When I could finally see again, the chapel was gone. Only the faint outline of its foundation remained, covered in a thin veil of drifting snow. "Elise," I gasped, turning to her. She lay beside me, motionless, eyes open. For a horrible second I thought she was gone. Then she blinked, slow, mechanical. "I can still hear them," she whispered. "They're under the snow." Her breath came out in 3 perfect puffs, evenly spaced like knocks on glass. And then, from somewhere beneath us, the hum began again. We didn't talk for the first hour after the chapel fell. The storm had swallowed every trace of the building, smoothing the world to white silence. It was as if nothing had ever been there. No wood, no pews, no frozen faces under the floor. Only the echo of that hum, curling under the wind like breath through teeth. Elise walked ahead of me down the slope. Her movements were stiff, mechanical. The hood of her parka pulled so tight I could barely see her face. Every so often she would stop, tilt her head, and whisper something I couldn't hear. When I caught up, her lips were moving but no sound came out. "Elise," I said. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on something in the distance. The ghost town below, where the cabins waited in rows of broken roofs and sagging walls. Smoke rose from one of the chimneys. I hadn't lit a fire. We reached the cabin and the door creaked open before I touched it. The air inside was warm, heavy with the smell of melted wax. Every candle we owned was burning, dozens of flames licking upward as though someone had been waiting. I turned to Elise. "Did you?" She shook her head once. Then the door shut behind us. The candles flickered violently. Their flames bent in the same rhythm, pulsing 3 times, pause 3 times, pause like breathing. I took a step back. "We're leaving. Right now." Elise smiled faintly. "We can't. They found a way through." "What are you talking about?" She raised a trembling hand and pointed to my camera bag in the corner. "The sound," she said. "You recorded their song. They're not in the ice anymore." The words hit like ice water. I stared at the bag. The small red recording light on my drone was glowing even though it wasn't plugged in. The hum began again, rising from that small device, soft, layered, human. I reached for it, but the sound deepened, vibrating through the floorboards, through my ribs. The walls groaned, the windows fogged over with frost. When the hum became a voice, I stumbled back. It was Elise's voice. The tone, the cadence, everything. She was still standing in front of me, eyes wide, lips closed. But from the drone speaker, her voice whispered, "We remember. We remember. We remember!" She covered her ears and screamed. The sound cut off, replaced by static. The candles went out at once, plunging the room into a thick, muffled dark. I found her hand in the blackness, pulled her toward the door. But it wouldn't move. The handle was frozen solid, rimed with frost so thick it burned my fingers. The air grew dense, almost liquid, filling my lungs with weight. Then came the first knock. 3 dull thuds from under the floor. Elise clutched my arm, trembling. Another 3 knocks, louder, moving closer to where we stood. The drone began recording again, its red light pulsing faster. I slammed it against the table, once, twice, until the casing cracked open. The sound only grew louder, the hum shifting into words that made no sense, like an old hymn dragged backward through water. The floorboards began to glow faintly blue beneath our feet. "Elise, we have to..." She wasn't listening anymore. She was kneeling on the floor, pressing her ear to the wood. Tears streamed down her face, freezing before they reached her chin. "They're so cold," she whispered. "They're asking to come inside." I grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her up, but her skin was like ice under my hands. Her pupils had faded almost completely, replaced by a pale, glassy sheen. I didn't think, I just acted. I kicked open the back window, the glass shattering outward. The wind howled in, scattering frost across the floor. I climbed through first, turned back to pull her after me. For a second she hesitated, still staring down at the glowing cracks. Then the wood splintered beneath her knees and something reached out. A hand, blue and translucent, fingers thin as icicles, gripped her wrist. She screamed. I pulled harder, adrenaline surging. The thing held on with impossible strength. More hands rose from the floor, dozens of them clawing for her, reaching, pulling. With one last heave I tore her free. We fell backward into the snow, gasping, the wind swallowing her cries. The cabin behind us shuddered once, twice, and then collapsed inward. A cloud of snow and dust rose where it had stood, glowing faintly blue in the night. Elise lay beside me, sobbing. "They're gone," she whispered. But the wind disagreed. It carried their voices, soft, endless, echoing through the valley. The same hum, the same impossible harmony, and somewhere inside it, I heard my own voice join theirs. I looked down. My camera lay half buried in the snow beside me, its lens cracked, still blinking red. The display showed a live feed, not of the valley, not of the collapsed cabin, of me, lying there in the snow, eyes open, lips moving, singing. I dropped the camera, heart stuttering. "Elise," I whispered, "we have to go." She didn't answer. Her breath came out in 3 perfect puffs, steady, measured, familiar. And when she finally turned her head toward me, her lips formed a single word. "Listen." The wind shifted. From somewhere deep beneath the snow came the faint sound of knocking, 3 times, perfectly spaced. There's something about old churches that always pulls me in. Maybe it's the quiet, or maybe it's the illusion of peace. That false promise of sanctuary that turns to ash the moment you realize not everything that kneels beneath a cross is holy. That's what I told myself when I came to Juneau. It was supposed to be another stop for my travel blog, another forgotten landmark buried in Alaska's past. The locals called it St. Bridget's Rest, a church that burned down nearly 100 years ago after a lightning strike. Only one part survived, the stone altar. They said it still stood in the ruins, covered in wax, candles burning no matter the weather. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was a warning. I thought it would make a great story. The hike up the Gastineau Channel Trail took 2 hours, all uphill. The fog hung low, thick as breath. My boots slipped on moss and half-frozen soil, my backpack heavy with camera gear. When I finally reached the ridge, the forest opened into a clearing. There wasn't much left of the church, just the skeleton of stone walls blackened by fire. The roof was gone, the air above opened to the gray Alaskan sky, and there in the center stood the altar. It was made of stone, cracked, ancient, but still somehow alive. Candles surrounded it in perfect symmetry, hundreds of them, some tall, some melted down to puddles, their flames flickering against the drizzle that fell from the sky. The rain didn't touch them. I remember the smell first. Wax, smoke, and something faintly sweet like flowers that had died days ago. I pulled out my camera. The display flickered. The autofocus refused to settle. Every time I pointed the lens toward the altar, the image bent, warped like heat rising off pavement. I stepped closer, curious. My breath fogged in the air, and that's when I noticed the candles. They were moving. No wind, no touch. But as I inhaled, their flames grew taller, brighter, like they were feeding off my breath. The wax dripped faster, pooling around the base of the altar in thick red trails. The closer I got, the stronger the heat. The air shimmered heavy with it. I could see the carvings etched into the altar's stone. Lines, circles, shapes that twisted the longer I looked. They weren't letters. They weren't symbols from any language I knew. They were wrong. I blinked hard. My vision blurred. The lines seemed to move, crawling, rearranging themselves into new patterns. I took a shaky step back. My heel hit something soft. I turned, another candle, smaller, burning bright and steady. It hadn't been there before. I turned again, and froze. The entire clearing had changed. The path I came from was gone. The ruins around me had shifted. The trees were farther away now, their outlines lost in mist. The altar stood closer, too close. I took a step and the ground beneath me pulsed, faintly glowing through the moss. I looked down. Wax was spreading across the dirt and the warm, soft, creeping outward like veins. "All right," I muttered, voice trembling. "This is where I leave." I turned and started walking toward where the trail should have been. My boots squelched through the wax. I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the sound of the flames behind me. The faint hiss of candles burning hotter, faster. But no matter which direction I took, the trees never got closer. The sound of the candles grew louder, filling the air with a soft rhythmic crackle. I looked over my shoulder. The altar was behind me again, closer. The flames leaned toward me, every single one, their glow pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. The carvings on the stone pulsed too, faint red light spilling from their grooves like blood from a fresh wound. Then I saw something moving behind the altar. A shadow. It looked human at first. Tall, robed, head bowed. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask if someone was there. The figure straightened slowly. Its face caught the light. There was no face, just wax. Smooth, pale wax melting in slow rivulets. It lifted its hand and for a brief moment, I saw flame dance in its palm, like a candle lit from within its body. That was enough. I ran. Branches whipped my face as I tore through the trees, blind, desperate. The air smelled like smoke and hot wax. My lungs burned. I didn't stop until the sound of burning faded and the forest swallowed me whole. When I finally stumbled back onto the main road, the sky had turned black. I collapsed against a rock, gasping. Behind me, far up the slope, I could still see it, that faint, steady glow in the trees. The candles, still burning. Even from miles away, their light didn't fade. I didn't plan to go back. When I finally made it down the mountain that night, I told myself I'd leave Juneau in the morning. Forget the altar, forget the candles, forget that strange, faceless figure that seemed to breathe fire. But forgetting doesn't work when something has seen you. That night, at the small inn near the harbor, I couldn't sleep. The smell of wax lingered in my hair, in my clothes, in the air. Even when I showered, I swore I could still feel heat on my skin. A faint, pulsing warmth, like I'd stood too close to a fire that never cooled. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep. I opened my laptop to offload my footage. At first, everything looked normal. Footsteps, snow, the clearing. But when the camera turned toward the altar, my stomach dropped. The candles were gone. The video showed the same ruins, the same empty stone foundation, but no altar. No light, no flickering flame, just darkness. I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame, desperate to see something, anything. Then for one frame, less than a second, a face appeared in the corner of the shot. My face. Eyes open. Lips parted. Wax dripping down my cheek like tears. And then it was gone. I slammed the laptop shut. My heart was hammering. The room felt colder now, though the radiator hummed beside the bed. I turned to check the window and froze. Someone had placed a candle on the sill. It wasn't there before. A thin white taper, its wax still wet. A small flame burning steady. The window was locked. No one could have reached it from outside. I don't know what made me do it, but I whispered aloud, "What do you want from me?" The flame flickered once, just once, and then bent forward toward me as if nodding. I blew it out. The smoke spiraled upward, and for a heartbeat, I swore I heard something inside it. A whisper, my name. That was the moment I knew sleep wasn't coming. At dawn, I packed my gear and went back. The fog was thicker that morning, lying heavy over the forest. The trail seemed longer, colder. Each step felt like a decision I couldn't undo. When I reached the clearing, the world looked wrong again. The ruins were gone. The church stood whole, a small white chapel, intact, unburned, glowed faintly in the mist. The steeple pointed into the fog like a blade. The door hung slightly open and the smell of melting wax drifted out in thick waves. I should have turned around. Every instinct screamed to leave. But curiosity and or maybe compulsion drove me forward. Inside, the air shimmered with heat. Hundreds of candles filled the pews, the walls, even the rafters. Flames of every size and color. Their light painted the wooden interior gold, making it hard to tell where the fire ended and the air began. The altar stood at the far end. The same one. Smooth stone, slick with liquid wax, its carvings pulsing faintly like veins under skin. And there he was, the figure. Standing behind the altar, motionless, robes the color of ash. The wax that formed his face had hardened now, smoother, almost human. I could see faint outlines of lips, of cheekbones, the hint of a mouth that could speak but didn't. "You're not real," I whispered. "You're part of the fire." The figure tilted its head. Its voice, when it came, was faint, soft enough that the flames themselves seemed to carry it. "Then why do you feel the heat?" The sound didn't come from its mouth. It came from everywhere, from the altar, from the walls, from inside me. I stepped back. "What are you?" "The altar remembers," it said. "Every prayer, every breath, every traveler who watched and walked away." As it spoke, the candles around the room grew brighter. Their wax began to flow faster, sliding across the floor in red streams. I looked down and realized the color wasn't red from dye. It was blood. The wax hissed as it touched my boots, sizzling like acid. I stumbled back toward the door, but the air thickened, hot and heavy. The flames leaned toward me again, drawn by my movement. My breath came ragged. "You can't leave," the voice said. "You brought the fire back." "I didn't bring anything," I shouted. You fed it." The altar flared white. Every candle in the chapel burst upward, their flames joining into a single column of fire that roared to life in the center of the room. For a moment I thought it would consume everything, but it didn't burn. It glowed steady, alive. In its light I saw them, figures, dozens of them standing among the pews, heads bowed. Some were missing faces. Others were entirely made of wax. Their bodies glistened, dripping slowly, each holding a candle cupped in their hands. One of them looked like me. I turned, running blindly for the door. The moment I crossed the threshold, the heat vanished. The forest was cold again, empty and gray. When I turned back, the chapel was gone. Only the stone altar remained, slick with wax. The candles still burned, even in daylight. Their flames glowed strong against the falling rain. I didn't hike back to town that day. I stumbled. Every step down the slope felt heavier, slower, like the air itself was thickening around me. My clothes still smelled of wax and smoke. My mind buzzed with the image of that chapel. The wax figures, the faceless one, the way the fire bent toward my breath as if it needed it to live. By the time I reached the road, I was shaking. My camera, still strapped to my chest, was burning hot. I pulled it off, dropped to the ground, and saw the lens fogging over from inside. When I powered it on, the screen flickered to life. White, then black, then an image that made me freeze. It was me, standing before the altar. But I hadn't filmed that. In the video, my eyes were blank, milky, unfocused. My hands were raised, palms open toward the flame, as if in worship. And behind me, the faceless wax figure stood closer than before, one hand on my shoulder. The footage cut off with a hiss. That was when I decided it needed to end. The altar, the candles, the place, and all of it. Before sunset, I was on my way back up the trail. I brought lighter fluid, a flare, and a rusted shovel I'd borrowed from the inn's maintenance shed. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I wasn't sure they'd believe me if I tried. The fog was waiting when I reached the ridge again, thick and unmoving, the way smoke hangs after something's burned. The clearing looked smaller now, tighter, as though the forest had grown closer overnight. The altar was still there, and the candles were still burning. Even in daylight, their flames were steady, defiant. The wax around their bases had hardened into shapes that almost looked like faces, their mouths open as if exhaling heat. I stepped into the circle of light. The air grew warm again, humming faintly like the space was breathing. "You don't belong here," I said aloud, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. "Whatever you are, you can't stay." The candles flickered. All at once, I poured the lighter fluid across the wax-stained stones, soaking the base of the altar until the smell of gasoline drowned out the sweetness. Then I pulled the flare, struck it, and threw it onto the stone. The explosion of light was instant, orange and red roaring upward. Flames devoured the altar, climbing the cracked stone like vines. I stumbled back, shielding my face. For a moment I thought it was working, but then the fire changed color. The orange deepened to gold, the red to white, until the flames looked pure, cold, like candlelight magnified 1,000 times. The air hummed, a deep vibrating sound that shook my bones. The flames didn't destroy the altar. They rebuilt it, the cracks sealed. The carvings glowed red, and in the center of the flame, the wax figure rose again, melting and reforming at the same time, its faceless head turning toward me. "You don't extinguish light," it said. The voice was soft, too soft for the roar of fire around it. But I heard it perfectly, as though it spoke directly inside my head. "You carry it." The fire reached outward, curling like fingers. My legs refused to move. I felt heat at my throat, not burning but breathing. The flames brushed my skin like air, sliding up around me, surrounding me. My camera, still slung across my shoulder, began recording by itself. Through the flicker of firelight, I saw my reflection in the altar's polished stone. My skin shimmered. Tiny beads of wax dripped from my temple down my cheek. The heat wasn't outside me anymore. It was inside. The figure extended its hand. "Every traveler lights a candle," it whispered. "You just lit yours." And then the world went white. When I woke, I was lying on the roadside. My gear scattered. My clothes were clean. No burns, no wax, no smell of smoke. The flare and lighter fluid were gone. For a moment I thought I'd dreamed it all, until I noticed the candle, a single white candle standing upright beside my hand. Its flame burned steady in the breeze. I tried to blow it out. It didn't move. I covered it with my glove. The fire passed through the fabric. Untouched, I dropped it, kicked snow over it, stomped it, and when I looked down again, it was standing there, perfect, burning still. That's when I saw the others, across the field, scattered along the road between trees. In the distance, more candles. Dozens, hundreds, their glow stretching all the way up toward the ridge, marking the path back to where the church used to be. When night fell, I watched from my motel window as their light pulsed through the fog, soft, rhythmic, alive, and in the reflection on the glass, I saw someone behind me, a man-shaped shadow, his face smooth, his eyes made of flame. He whispered one word: "Forever." The next morning I left Juneau, but the candles didn't, they followed. Everywhere I go I see one, in hotel hallways, in tunnels, in mirrors. Always the same flame, and when I sleep I dream of the altar. The wax running like blood, the warmth crawling beneath my skin. And sometimes when I wake, the air beside my bed still flickers. The candles never die. I'd been chasing haunted churches across Alaska for months, but none of them felt alive until St. Elias. It sat on the edge of the forest outside Sitka, a crooked white-walled chapel sinking slowly into moss and time. The roof sagged. The windows were boarded. Every gust of wind made the steeple moan. Locals told me not to bother filming there. They said the church was sealed in the late 1960s, after something happened in the confessional. A woman came to confess, one old fisherman told me, and never left. He said it the way people say weather is coming. Calm, resigned. I thought it was folklore. Perfect clickbait for my paranormal vlog. So I packed my camera, drone, and mic and hiked out on a gray December morning when the air smelled like salt and pine sap. The trail was narrow, half buried under snow. The sound of the sea followed me all the way to the clearing where the chapel waited, hunched against the wind like a wounded animal. When I pushed open the heavy doors, a rush of cold air sighed out, dry and stale like a tomb breathing. Dust fell in sheets from the rafters. Sunlight leaked through a single cracked window, cutting the darkness into bands of gold. Inside, time had stopped. Hymnals lay open on the pews. Wax dripped like frozen rain down the altar candles. The air carried a faint sweetness, perfume maybe, layered over the smell of rot. I started filming. St. Elias Chapel, I said into the mic. Built 1903, burned partially in 52, officially abandoned since 1967. Locals say a woman came to confess here and never walked out. My voice echoed down the nave, softer each time until the sound seemed to come back from deeper in the church. That was when I noticed the door to the confessional. It stood half hidden behind a column, tall, narrow, painted red once but now flaking to gray. A heavy padlock hung on the handle, rusted solid. I knelt and ran my hand along the wood. The air around it was warmer than the rest of the church, faintly scented. The same perfume from before, sweet and sick. I shouldn't have broken the lock. But curiosity is stronger than caution when a camera's rolling. The padlock snapped easily under the pry bar. The hinges groaned as the door swung inward. Inside, the confessional was small, barely big enough for one person to kneel. A thin wooden screen separated the booths. The seat was covered in a film of dust, except in the center where it was clean, polished smooth as if someone had been sitting there recently. I leaned closer. The wood was warm. A drop of sweat rolled down my neck despite the cold. I lifted my camera, panning across the tiny space. On the other side of the screen, darkness, but the faint sound of breathing came through the slats. "Hello?" I whispered. The breathing stopped. Then the seat on the opposite side creaked. Slow, deliberate. "Ma'am," I said, "are you—" A voice cut me off, a whisper so close it seemed to brush my ear through the screen. "It's your turn." I stumbled back, hitting the wall. The light on my camera flickered. The smell of perfume grew stronger. Cloying, sweet like flowers left too long in a vase. My stomach twisted. I aimed the camera at the screen again. Nothing, no one. But the seat on the other side was moving, faintly rocking, like someone invisible had just shifted their weight. I reached for the door handle, ready to bolt, but the confessional door slammed shut on its own, sealing me inside. The lock clicked back into place from the outside. My flashlight died. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. Then from the darkness came a whisper, my own voice, low and trembling. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." I hadn't spoken those words. The air thickened. My throat burned. Every inhale tasted like smoke and perfume. Something cold brushed my neck. Fingertips. I shoved at the door, kicked it, screamed. The wood splintered and I stumbled out into the main hall, gasping. The church was different now. Every candle on the altar was lit. Their flames swayed in perfect unison, glowing gold against the rotten wood. Shadows stretched across the pews like hands reaching for me. I turned toward the entrance. The door was open. Snow blew in, scattering ash across the floorboards. I ran. When I reached the clearing outside, the wind hit hard, clean, sharp, real. I didn't stop running until the church was a smudge between the trees. Only then did I look back. Through the open doorway, I could see movement. Someone kneeling inside the confessional, head bowed, hands clasped in prayer. It was my shape, my jacket, my camera still blinking red, and the woman's voice, faint and tender, carried through the wind. "Bless me, Father, for he has returned." I made it back to town before midnight, but it didn't feel like escape. The salt wind off the harbor should have cleared my head, but my lungs still ached like the church air hadn't left them. The perfume smell lingered too. Sweet, thick, impossible to wash off. I kept telling myself the same line over and over. Old wood creaks. Microphones pick up echoes. Fear makes its own noises. I'd said it after every shoot, every haunted site that turned out to be nothing but shadows and imagination. It always worked before. This time it didn't. When I reached the motel, I dumped my camera bag on the bed and pressed play on the recorder. The red light blinked once, then steadied. The first minutes were the usual. My voice narrating the exterior, my boots scuffing against the floorboards, the metallic snap of the padlock breaking. Then, the breathing started. Not mine. It was slower, deeper, like someone on the other side of the microphone. I turned the volume higher. I could hear my own voice say, "Ma'am, are you..." And then it came again, that same whisper from the church. "Clear this time, it's your turn." My stomach nodded. I skipped forward in the audio, desperate to find the moment I'd run out, something to prove it was over. But after the sound of my footsteps and the church door slamming behind me, the recording didn't end. It kept going. Breathing. Footsteps. Then my voice again, except I wasn't speaking. I was gone from the building when these words were recorded. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." The tone was slow, rehearsed, like someone learning to imitate me. The recorder clicked off on its own. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. The heater hummed softly. Outside, the wind dragged something metallic across the pavement, a sound like chains. I told myself it was a flagpole or a loose gutter. Then I smelled it again, perfume, faint but distinct, flowery, old. I turned toward the door. Underneath it, the faintest orange glow pulsed against the carpet, like candlelight. When I opened it, the hallway was empty. But on the floor, placed neatly by the threshold, was a small white votive candle in a glass cup. The wax inside was melted, still warm. I didn't sleep. I packed everything, camera, recorder, laptop, and left the room by dawn. I told myself I'd drive to Anchorage, catch a flight, go home. I'd delete the footage, pretend this story never existed. But curiosity is a disease I can't cure. 2 hours into the drive, I pulled off near a frozen river to check my files one more time. My camera battery had died back in Sitka, but I wanted to see the last clip before it cut out. I pressed play. The lens showed me running from the confessional, the pews blurring past. Then the camera dropped, landing sideways. The image tilted, part ceiling, part floor. My boots thundered toward the door. Then, after I was gone, the confessional door in the background opened by itself. A hand reached out, pale, thin, dripping with something dark. It rested on the edge of the booth. And then, slowly, another shape emerged. A woman in a dark shawl, her face hidden behind a lace veil. She moved with strange grace, not walking but gliding, and stopped right where the camera had fallen. For a few seconds, she stared straight into the lens, then she whispered, "He will confess again," and the video ended. My throat went dry. I sat there in the car, staring at the frozen river, the reflection of the clouds warping across the ice. I wanted to delete the footage, to smash the camera, to pretend it was some optical glitch. But as I looked closer at the screen, I noticed something I hadn't before. In the final frame behind the woman, something was carved into the confessional wall, letters burned into the wood. Thomas Rylan. My full name, the date below it matched today's. I stared until my eyes burned. Then I turned the key in the ignition and drove, fast. But the road was empty for miles. Snow fell thicker, the horizon vanished. My headlights caught something in the distance, a shape on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a mile marker. Then it moved, a wooden door. Standing upright in the snow, freestanding with a cross cut into the top, and behind that cross, flickering faintly, candlelight. I drove faster. The scent of perfume filled the car. My breath clouded the windshield. Then from the speaker where my phone was charging, a faint sound played. My recorder click. "My child," a woman's voice said, soft and near. "Are you ready to confess?" The screen on my phone lit up. It was recording again. My own voice came next. "Yes, Father. Forgive me." I hadn't said it. My lips were still. But I heard myself all the same, calm and steady, echoing through the car. Then the engine died. The lights went out. In the darkness, the scent grew stronger. I looked up and saw her in the rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat. Face hidden behind lace, hands clasped, whispering something under her breath. The sound was soft, rhythmic, Hail Mary, full of grace, but backward. I don't remember deciding to turn back toward Sitka. The car must have driven itself there. the road unraveling beneath my tires like a memory I couldn't erase. By the time I realized where I was, the forest had already thickened, and I could see the crooked steeple of St. Elias rising above the trees like a broken tooth. I stopped at the edge of the clearing. The engine ticked, cooling. The wind was still. I stepped out, breath hanging white in the air. There were no new tracks in the snow. The path I had made 2 days earlier was already filled in, but the door of the chapel was open, swinging slowly on its hinges as if it had been waiting. Inside, the candles burned again. Every one of them. They lined the altar, the windowsills, even the pews. Hundreds of steady flames casting slow waves of light through the dust. The scent of perfume was stronger now, almost suffocating. I called out, "Who are you?" No answer. Only the sound of my own voice rolling back through the nave, quieter each time, like someone whispering my words from far away. The confessional stood where I'd left it, half hidden behind the column. The door I'd shattered was whole again, the lock unbroken, the wood freshly varnished as if decades of dust had been wiped clean overnight. My recorder in my jacket pocket clicked on by itself. Static filled the silence. Then the same voice that had haunted my phone and camera spoke again. Low, smooth, patient. "You came back." I froze. "I didn't want to." "But you did," the voice replied. "You remember what you promised." I stepped closer to the booth. I promised nothing. From behind the lattice I heard breathing. A woman's. Slow even, the kind of breathing you hear when someone's praying. "You asked forgiveness," she said. "I didn't mean it." "You always mean it the last time." The candlelight dimmed. The shadows of the pews stretched, bending toward me, sliding like long fingers across the floorboards. The smell of flowers turned sour, sharp. I lifted my flashlight and pushed the confessional door open. The booth was empty. No footprints in the dust. No shape behind the screen. But the seat was warm, and the wooden lattice between the booths was pulsing slowly like a heartbeat under varnish. I backed away, heart pounding. But the moment I turned toward the door, the church shifted. The doorway was gone. In its place stood another confessional, identical, waiting open. I spun back. The first one had vanished. The entire church now seemed made of them, row after row of confessionals stretching into the dark. From each one came a faint sound, soft murmurs, overlapping whispers, voices confessing in every tone and language, blending into one endless hush of regret. And above it all, one voice, hers. "Come back to your seat." The floor tilted beneath me. My flashlight slipped from my hand, the beam rolling over the floorboards. For a second I saw them, bare feet, dozens of them walking beneath the pews, all moving in the same direction. Toward me. I stumbled backward until my shoulder hit the wall. The recorder crackled again in my pocket. My own voice came through, steady and calm. "I am ready, Father." The confessional nearest to me creaked open. Warm air spilled out, heavy with perfume. I could see a faint silhouette inside, kneeling, head bowed. Not hers. Mine. I took one step closer. The door slammed shut. The candles went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Only the smell remained, cloying and sweet. Then one by one the confessionals began to open again. Light poured out through the cracks, white and gold, flooding the walls with halos that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. "You confessed," the woman whispered from everywhere at once. "Now you must listen." The air thickened. My ears filled with whispers, hundreds of them, each one my voice repeating the same line. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." Then the walls began to move. The entire church inhaled. The floor rose under my feet, groaning like lungs expanding. My recorder burned hot in my pocket. I yanked it out and threw it onto the floor. The screen blinked, recording. The last thing it captured was a hand reaching from inside the confessional, pale and thin, pressing flat against the wood. Then the door closed again. When I opened my eyes, I was outside. snow falling soft and steady, muffling the world. The church behind me looked smaller, half swallowed by trees. The windows were dark. No light, no smoke. I thought maybe it was finally over. Then I heard it, the faint creak of wood from within, and a voice, gentle, patient, echoing through the snow. Next. I left Sitka that night. I don't remember the drive, only the sea on one side and the mountains on the other, but the story didn't end there. Every Sunday since, my phone records on its own. Short clips, always the same sound, breathing, whispering, the creak of a confessional door. Sometimes when I listen close, I hear my own voice again. Only this time, it's not asking forgiveness, it's offering it. And faintly, beneath it all, the same perfume drifts through the room, sweet and old. The smell of someone still waiting for her turn. The first thing I learned about the chapel outside Barrow was that no one would talk about it directly. They called it the Northern One, or the Mistake Church, or just that place up the ridge. Every guide I hired refused to take me there. One man, an old Inupiat hunter, only said, "The cross points where no sun ever rises. That's not for the living." That alone was enough to make me go. I was traveling north for my documentary, Faith in the Frozen. The idea was to film the remnants of missionary work swallowed by the Arctic, chapels built on tundra that had forgotten them. But this one, the chapel that faced north, wasn't in any record. No coordinates, no foundation listed. Just a rumor passed quietly, like a warning wrapped in a story. I set out alone before sunrise. The snowfields around Barrow stretched endless silver beneath a dull sky. The wind screamed over the ice, biting through every layer of my coat. The further north I drove, the quieter the world became. No birds, no engines, not even the sound of my breath inside the helmet. After 3 hours, I saw it. A dark silhouette breaking the white horizon, small, hunched, and crooked against the wind. The forgotten chapel. It sat half buried in permafrost, its wooden walls warped and cracked. The steeple leaned forward, and the cross on top, the one thing still intact, faced the wrong direction. Not toward the east like every Christian chapel. Not even toward the sunrise. It faced north, backwards, toward the tundra and the endless dark beyond. I stopped my snowmobile and stared. Even from that distance, the air around it looked strange. The way heat wavers on asphalt, except this was cold, shimmering with frost. When I reached the door, I noticed something else. The snow against the base of the walls was melted. Small puddles of dark water pooled around the foundation, steaming faintly in the freezing air. I pushed the door open. The hinges shrieked. Inside, the air was colder than outside, dead, heavy, and wrong. Every surface glistened with ice. The pews were split and warped, their ends blackened as though burned long ago. And every window, every single one, had been painted black from the inside. Thick, uneven brushstrokes sealing out all light. Only the altar was untouched, a simple slab of stone carved directly into the frozen floor, with a wooden cross behind it. That cross, too, faced backward. I stepped closer. The walls creaked. Frost fell from the ceiling in quiet flakes. When I reached the altar, I noticed something faint carved into the surface. Lines, circles, small words written in Latin. Most were faded, but one stood out, carved deeper than the rest. Demum suam convertit. I took a picture and translated it later. It meant it turned its home around. A gust of wind howled through a broken crack in the roof. The door slammed shut behind me, shaking dust from the rafters. I spun around, flashlight sweeping the darkness. That's when I saw it. A small window near the back, its glass coated black like the others, except for one corner where the paint had cracked. A tiny spot of clear glass. I walked toward it, wiping the frost away with my glove until a small circle appeared. Outside there was nothing but endless white tundra. No trees, no tracks, no movement. Then something moved. A shape. Faint, human, standing in the snow not far from the wall. Too close, too still. I leaned closer, trying to focus. The figure didn't move. It was facing the chapel. Facing me. And then I realized the reflection was wrong. The window showed not the outside world, but the inside. That figure was inside the chapel, standing behind me. I froze. My breath clouded the glass, hiding the image. When I wiped it clear again, the figure was gone. But something else had changed. The cross behind the altar had turned. It no longer faced north. It faced me. I stumbled backward, flashlight shaking. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking in the cold air. The sound didn't echo. It died the moment it left my mouth, like the walls were swallowing it whole. The wood of the pews creaked again. One by one, they began to shift, slow and deliberate, until they all faced the back wall, facing away from the altar, away from me, facing north. I turned toward the door. Frost was crawling up its frame, sealing it shut in a thin sheet of ice. Then the candles I hadn't seen before, lit themselves. Small blue flames flickering along the altar and windows. The light reflected off the black paint of the glass, and for a second I saw faces there, dozens of them, pressed against the inside of the windows, mouths open, whispering something I couldn't hear. I clutched the recorder in my pocket and hit record. My breath came in short bursts. "This is Thomas," I whispered. "I'm inside the chapel north of Barrow. The windows, there's something." A sound cut me off. Wood, splintering. I turned. The cross on the altar twisted slowly, its base grinding against the stone. It turned one full circle, creaking, then stopped, now facing downward. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then the whispering started again. Louder this time, layered voices coming from the walls, the ceiling, beneath the floor. 100 overlapping prayers, all backward. The black paint on the windows began to crack, light leaking through like veins. And on the altar, frost spread upward, forming letters in white ice. "Follow where it points." The cross tilted again, toward the door. I ran. The ice shattered under my boots. I slammed into the door until it gave way and burst into the blinding white outside. The cold hit like a hammer. When I turned back, the chapel looked smaller. The cross faint against the sky, now upright again, pointing north once more. But as I caught my breath, I noticed something else. In the distance, miles across the tundra, another cross had risen from the snow, facing me. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cross turning. Slow, deliberate. The sound of grinding wood echoing somewhere deep inside my skull. At dawn, I looked out the cabin window toward the tundra. The world was flat, white, infinite. But I could still see it. A faint dark line on the horizon. The second cross. The one that hadn't been there before. I told myself it had to be a marker, driftwood maybe, or a trick of the light. But I couldn't stop thinking about the words carved into the frost inside the chapel. Follow where it points. By noon, I was already packing my camera again. The air that day was colder, not sharp, just heavy, like it carried weight. I followed the snowmobile tracks I'd made the day before, each one half filled from the wind. The sky above was a flat, colorless gray, no sun to tell direction, no sound except the steady hum of the engine. It took an hour to reach the chapel again. The door hung open now, swinging gently in the wind. I didn't go inside. I couldn't bring myself to. Instead, I turned to face where the cross had been pointing, due north. And there, faint and far, something broke the horizon. A shadow half swallowed by snow. I started walking. The terrain grew uneven, dotted with chunks of frozen earth and mounds of ice that crunched under my boots. The wind died entirely. After a while, I realized I couldn't hear the snowmobile anymore. I turned around. The chapel was gone, swallowed by fog. I kept moving. The shape ahead grew clearer. Another building. Smaller. Squatter. The same blackened wood. The same crooked roofline. Another chapel. I wiped the frost from my visor. The structure stood almost completely buried, only its steeple and part of the front wall visible. The cross on top leaned forward slightly, just like the first. Only this one pointed down, toward the ground. Toward something beneath the ice. I knelt beside the wall, brushing away the snow with my gloves. My hand hit stone. A slab, cracked and old. Etched into it were more words, faded by time but still visible. Beneath, it continues. A sudden gust of wind howled across the tundra, loud enough to drown my heartbeat. It carried with it something faint, the sound of bells, not clear, not distant, muffled as if ringing from under the earth. I turned on the recorder. "This is Thomas," I whispered. "There's another chapel here. The cross faces down, and I think something's below." My voice shook. "I hear bells." I found a small hatch near the front, half buried under frost. Metal, rusted, but clearly man-made. I scraped the ice away until the handle appeared, stiff with age. It took everything I had to pry it open. A rush of air poured out, not cold this time, but warm and stale, like breath exhaled from deep underground. Inside was a narrow staircase carved into the ice, descending into darkness. The sound of bells grew louder. Every rational thought told me to leave, but the same pull that had driven me to every cursed church in this God-forsaken state was stronger than fear. I went down. The steps were slick, uneven. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching glimpses of stone walls lined with frost. The air grew warmer the deeper I went. The smell of wet wood and old smoke filled the narrow passage. After maybe 20 steps, I reached a door. Wooden. Sealed shut with a heavy iron cross nailed through the center. Something pulsed beneath it. Faint vibrations, almost like heartbeats. The bells stopped. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then from the other side of the door came a single knock. I froze. Another knock followed, slow, deliberate, perfectly spaced. Then a voice, muffled by wood but clear enough to hear. "Turn it back." I stumbled up the steps, flashlight shaking, heart hammering so loud I thought it would burst. The air grew thick, heavy. By the time I reached the hatch, it slammed shut above me. The light went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Then from somewhere deep below, the bells began again. Not one, not two, but hundreds, ringing out of rhythm, echoing through the tunnel like screams. I fumbled for my recorder. My fingers shook so badly I could barely press the button. "If anyone finds this," I began, but the words died in my throat. Something was crawling up the steps. I heard it. Slow, dragging, each movement wet and deliberate. The sound of fingers scraping along ice. The bells grew louder, the pitch rising until it was unbearable. I pressed my back against the wall, flashlight flickering in and out. Then I saw it. A hand reaching from the dark below, pale, split open at the knuckles. The fingers twisted like roots, dragging something unseen behind them. I turned and threw myself against the hatch. It held for one breath, then another, before finally bursting open. I crawled out into the snow, gasping. The world above was almost too bright. The fog had cleared, and the sun hung low, pale as bone. I staggered to my feet. The chapel was gone. Not buried. Gone. I looked around wildly, heart racing. No second structure. No hatch. Just an endless field of white. But when I turned my recorder off, I heard it. The bells, still ringing beneath the ice. And when I looked down, the snow under my boots had begun to sink, softening into a faint cross shape. Perfectly north, perfectly aligned. The wind shifted then, and far behind me, the original chapel came into view again, its cross no longer pointing north. It was pointing at me. When I woke the next morning, the bells were still ringing. Not in my ears, underneath me. I had fallen asleep inside the snowmobile somewhere between panic and exhaustion. The sky outside was pale gray, the color of old bone. The sound was faint, rhythmic, pulsing through the ground. Not metal against metal, but deeper, older. I told myself it was just the wind echoing through ice caverns. But as I stepped out, I realized the rhythm matched my heartbeat. That's when I noticed the marks. All around the snowmobile, the snow had shifted overnight, forming shallow grooves. Not animal prints, not even human. Crosses, perfectly carved into the snow, each one pointing in a different direction, like a compass shattered in confusion. I stood there frozen. The one closest to me pointed north again, toward where the chapel had been. Only this time, I could see something glinting far in the distance. Metal. I started walking. The wind picked up as I crossed the tundra, sharp and hollow. The snow beneath my boots grew thinner, revealing a dark, glassy surface below, ice that shimmered like polished stone. Beneath it, shadows moved, shapes. And there it was again. The outline of the chapel, but smaller, buried halfway under the ice. The steeple jutted out just enough for the cross to pierce the air, but this cross was different. It wasn't wood or iron. It was made of bone. The base was fused into the roof as though it had grown there. Its surface was smooth and pale, almost translucent, and it was humming, vibrating softly, a low note that made my ribs ache. I set the recorder down on the snow. The red light blinked steady. "It's here," I whispered. "Another structure, smaller, maybe older. The cross is made of..." I hesitated. "I think it's organic." The hum deepened. Cracks began spreading along the ice beneath my feet, thin white lines branching outward like veins. I dropped to one knee, pressing my palm against the surface, and felt it. Movement. Something was turning below. Slow, grinding, deliberate. The cross shifted slightly, angling toward me. My reflection warped across the ice, splitting into two, then three, then dozens, every face staring back with the same expression of silent dread. Then the sound began. Not bells this time. Voices. They rose up through the ice, muffled but clear enough to hear. Prayers in languages I didn't know. Some whispered, some screamed, all tangled together in a single endless chant. Domum suam convertit. It turned its home around. The words from the first chapel. I stumbled back. The ice trembled again, and a section near the steeple shattered inward, sending up a burst of frost. For a moment I saw down into the darkness, an open space filled with pale light. Rows of crosses lined the walls below, hundreds of them, all facing different directions. Some upright, some upside down, some spinning slowly as though moved by unseen hands. In the center of it all stood something larger, a massive wheel of bone and wood, connected to the base of the cross above. It turned slowly, scraping against the walls, its spokes carved with thousands of names. I couldn't read them, but one caught my eye. Mine. Thomas Rylan, freshly carved. I didn't think. I ran, but the tundra had changed again. The horizon was gone, replaced by fog so thick it swallowed everything beyond 10 feet. My footprints filled in behind me as I moved. The bells returned closer now, louder, pounding through the air like heartbeats. The hum became unbearable, a deep vibration that rattled my teeth. And then the voice came. Every cross must turn. I spun around. The bone cross stood at the edge of the fog, looming taller than before. Something hung from it now, a shape twisting gently in the wind. A man. No, not a man. A reflection. My reflection. Its head drooped forward, its arms outstretched, and the moment I saw it move, even slightly, I understood. The crosses weren't built to face the wrong way. They were built to correct what was wrong. I stumbled backward, screaming into the fog, but the sound didn't carry. My voice fell flat, eaten by the cold. I fumbled for the recorder, my hand shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. The red light still blinked. "This is Thomas," I gasped. "There's something under the ice and it's moving, turning. The chapel isn't a building. It's..." The ground split open beneath me. The last thing I remember is falling. The light of the cross fading above me as the ice swallowed me whole. The hum grew deafening and then silence, a silence so complete it felt alive. I woke in a hospital 3 days later. They said a rescue team found my snowmobile half buried in snow, engine running. No sign of injury, no frostbite. I'd been lying there unconscious, pulse steady, eyes open. I told them I'd fallen through the ice. They said there was no ice nearby, just solid permafrost. No structure, no chapel. When they handed me my belongings, I found the recorder still in my coat pocket. The battery was dead, but that night when I plugged it in, it came to life on its own, static, then faint, rhythmic creaking, a wooden cross turning, and my voice, whispering from far away, "Face the north. Thomas." The recording ended with one last sound, and slow, deliberate, echoing through the static, the creak of something massive turning in the ice. Then a single bell rang, and outside my window, I swear the cross on the chapel across the street had turned.